Let me recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Suozzi, to inquire.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ambassador, for being with us here today. And I want to echo the comments of many of my colleagues in thanking you for your public service. You have really done a great service to the people of the United States of America, using your expertise and talent to help address some very thorny issues in what I believe has been a very forthright and balanced way. So I want to thank you for your service. I want to associate myself with the remarks of all of my colleagues who talked about the USMCA and the importance of enforcement regarding labor and regarding the environment. And I want to spend the balance of my time just talking with you about China. As I've said before to you, here in the United States of America, we have believed that ever since Nixon went to China, that the more that China was exposed to our way of life, the more they were exposed to our capitalist system, the more they were exposed to our democracy, the more they would become like us. And that clearly has not happened. Obviously, they've excelled under our trade policies with them over the past several years, much to our detriment. In fact, you've referred to their state-sponsored economy as being an existential threat to us. And I appreciate your hardline approach to China. I'm very concerned about a lot of China's behavior regarding its treatment of the Uyghurs and the forced labor camps that they have, where many of those forced labor products are introduced into our supply chain and are brought here into the United States. And I'm concerned that this administration has not taken the Chinese to task, even as part of our trade negotiations, regarding their treatment of the Uyghurs and others. When we have the power to do so currently, and it really hasn't even been brought up. In fact, there's a bill that's been passed with strong bipartisan support out of both houses that has not yet been signed by the president regarding the Uyghurs. I read I skimmed, I should say, I haven't read it as carefully as I will. It's really impressive. An article that you wrote in the Council of Foreign Relations about how to make trade work for workers, charting a path between protectionism and globalism. And the parts that I have read are just really fantastic and balanced, where you talk about the role of trade, whether it's foreign policy and achieving our geopolitical goals, or whether it's economic efficiency and maximizing output and consumer prices. How do we balance our desire to get more of the world to be like us, as far as creating the society that we think it should be, that respects workers' rights, that protects the environment, that creates a just world, with our desire to create an economically efficient system at the same time? How do we balance those things? And what is your plan for dealing with China as we see them as rejecting these ideas that we've adopted in our country and much of the Western world has adopted, and getting them to be more like us, or if they don't, recognizing that we can't continue to have this liberal trade policy with them? But I can't hear you.
Would you put your microphone on? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment on the article. I really do hope that members read it. I think it really does reflect the way a lot of us think about manufacturing and about trade policy. And I would say on the issue of China generally, no one has done more than President Trump to try to rebalance our relationship with China, particularly in my space, where really nothing was done. And I've been howling about it, and I don't say that as a partisan comment at all, because I was howling about it in the 90s, and then I was howling about it 10 years later, and I was howling about it 10 years after that. So no one has done anything, and we've gone out and put major tariffs in place and done all the things that I think all of us would look back to. But it was pretty obvious from the beginning that we were letting this get out of control. When you ask about China, I always ask people to think about what is China, right? China is not a monolith. China is several groups of people. And there are people in China who are hardliners and are doing a lot of the things that we find really quite horrific. not just to the Uyghurs, but in terms of our own relationship in the Cyber Rim.
Ambassador, I have to cut you off. I'm running out of time. I need to know what we're going to do about the Uyghurs in the forced labor camps.
Well, I mean, in the first place, from the point of view of our trade agreement doesn't cover this issue, but I would say in terms of importation, just on that specific question, and then maybe you and I can have a longer philosophical argument offline about this generally, because I really do want to engage with you on it. But forced labor products cannot be shipped into the United States, and that's the U.S. law, and that's something that will be strongly enforced.
Thank the
But they are
gentleman.
currently being sent to the United States.
Yeah, thank the gentleman. Let me recognize the gentlelady from Florida.